I stood in my kitchen rolling dough for my famous Italian wedding cookies and chatting on the phone with my daughter-in-law Tracy. Oh, he's so excited to see you this weekend, Camille. Jared keeps telling me, Grandma has horses and she makes me lots of sweets. I don't think he's thought about anything else. I smiled. Well, you just tell him I'm just as excited as he is. And I'm so sorry it couldn't be under better circumstances. Yeah, I know, Tracy said sadly. My cousin and I have not seen each other in years. I'm so sad about it. I said her cancer spread too quickly. Well, you just let me know if you and Martin need anything at all. Thanks, Camille. Tracy sighed in relief. I was going to have my grandson, Jared, for 2 whole days, while my son Martin and his wife Tracy drove to Buffalo for her cousin's funeral. It was the first time I was going to have my 4-year-old grandson overnight. I was excited about it, and had been baking his favorite cookies and treats for the last week. I mean, what sort of grandma would I be if I didn't spoil my little grandson? The day he arrived, my son Martin was quite relieved to have a mini break. Just so that you know, he hasn't been sleeping much, and because of it, I haven't been sleeping either. Oh, that's okay. I remember you had the same problem about Jared's age. I winked. Mom, no, this isn't a wetting the bed thing. He wakes up at odd times of the night, and I catch him talking to no one. On one occasion, I found him outside on our back deck, just standing there. And he likes to tell the craziest stories about things, too. I think he just has an overactive imagination. I mean, you know how kids are. I just think he's sleepwalking, and, well, we plan to see a doctor when we get back. I just wanted to warn you so you know what to expect. I looked at my worried son and nodded, saying nothing. I figured I could handle my grandson well on my own. After all, I had raised 3 sons, and if you count my late husband, 4 boys in all. I kissed Martin on the cheek and hugged Tracy, as they had to get on the road. I took my grandson into the house. We settled down, and I got out a board game. Well, which one do you want to play first? I asked him. He looked at me. His dark curly hair fell into ringlets around his head, and he looked at all 4 board games very seriously, and then pointed to Candyland. I smiled. Good choice. I opened the box and set up the game. We smiled and played for about an hour, and then I made Jared some snacks and we watched a bit of television. I have a dog poodle mix named Sam that needed to go out, so Jared and I walked Sam around my block of the neighborhood. I let Jared help me hold the leash, and we walked and talked. Once we completed our walk around the block, Jared and I had dinner, and then it was time for us to relax. I let Jared play in the bathtub while I made him some hot cocoa. It wasn't long before Jared soon was asleep, and I picked him up and carried him to the spare room where he would be sleeping for the night. I call it an extra bedroom, but it was the bedroom his father shared with his brother growing up. Once he was safe and sound, I shut the door, leaving it cracked so that some of the light in the bathroom would assist him in seeing in the hallway, just in case he had to get up in the middle of the night. I went to my room and watched the news, then turned off the television, and before I knew it, I was fast asleep myself. The very next morning, Jared woke up sometime after 9 a.m., and I let Sam out the back door to do his business when Jared stood next to me watching the dog. My other grandma says that Sam is not going to live long. I looked down at him, puzzled as to where he got that information. What? Who said that? My other grandma. She came to my window last night. Funny, she looks exactly like you, Grandma Cam. I figured it must be a dream he had had, and so I shrugged it off. Well, Sam is 10 years old. I hope he can make it a little longer. Jared, what do you want for breakfast? I don't want anything. My other grandma says I need to eat less processed foods. I looked at the boy, utterly stunned at what he was saying. I know his father did mention he was acting a little strangely. I figured he must have had one heck of a dream. Well, I'm having eggs, and eggs aren't processed food. If you want, I can make you an egg. I think eggs should be fine, but no toast, I think. I smiled and shook my head, not thinking much about it, The two of us hung out that morning, and then Jared asked if he could go outside and play. "Only where I can see you," I said, pointing to the patio doors. "Okay, Grandma," he said, as his chubby legs ran outside with his basketball. I looked at him, and then went over to sit in front of the kitchen table where I could see him. My yard was fenced in with a tall wooden fence, and even though I knew he couldn't go anywhere, I still felt the need to keep an eye on him. I read the newspaper and sipped on some tea while I kept my eyes on Jared. I stood up from time to time to ensure he was where I told him to be. I had only blinked for a second when I picked up my newspaper, turned the page to an article about some corrupt politician, when I looked up, and Jared was gone, ball and all. I jumped up and ran to the back door to see where he had gone. I looked around and spun myself in circles. There was no way. No way he got out of my backyard. I didn't even have a gate, and there was no way Jared climbed the fence. "Jared!" No sound came. All I heard were the birds chirping in the distance. It was as though time had frozen entirely in ice. I felt strange. I couldn't move from fear. It had taken over my body and mind. Where was my grandson? Then I heard the tiniest peep coming from the window in the room Jared shared while he was staying with me. The window was open for some reason, and I could hear laughing. "Jared, is that you?" I ran to the back of the house, and Jared was sitting on the floor laughing. When he looked up at me, he stopped laughing and looked almost surprised to see me standing in the doorway. "Hi, Grandma," he said, standing up and coming over to me. "Jared, how did you get back in the house?" I was genuinely frightened and puzzled, because to do so he would have had to find his way over the fence in the backyard and walked around to the front door, which was locked. "You helped me." "What?" "Other Grandma, the one that looks like you. She helped me get in. She said if I closed my eyes, we could play a game. I closed my eyes, and I was here when I opened them." I was growing terrified now, and I wasn't sure what to do. "Jared, you know that when you tell lies that aren't very nice, it makes people not trust you. Tell Grandma the truth. How did you get in here?" Jared grew upset then and looked at me with tears streaming down his face. "I told you. The other Grandma." He began to cry then, and I knew he was telling the truth. But how? I had no idea, because none of it was making any sense. I locked all the doors and the windows and had Jared sleep in my bed his last night there. I also warned him to stop talking to the other Grandma. To be honest, it frightened me. And when Martin and Tracy came to pick up Jared the next morning, I explained what he had been telling me. "You see, Mom, that's why we want to take him to see a doctor. You see, before we dropped him off, he had been telling us that his other parents wanted him to come live with them. It frightened Tracy so severely that she nearly had a nervous breakdown. We just didn't mention it." I sat shocked, listening to what Martin had described to me. That afternoon, Martin and Tracy drove Jared home, and I remained perplexed. My son and daughter-in-law seemed very worried when they left. I had offered to let them all stay at least a night at my house so they didn't have to make up a long drive back home. Martin declined, to say he just wanted to get home as fast as he could and get Jared back on his routine. Tracy looked pale and quite ill, and I hugged her tighter than usual when they left. Since the incident at my house, no other strange events have occurred with Jared, and he no longer talks about needing to go live with his other parents. In fact, Martin called me 3 days after he had picked Jared up from my home and seemed unusually in high spirits. I was a bit baffled because I had never heard my son speak so excitedly or positive before about anything. "Well, you sound better, Martin," I said while I listened to him laughing on the other end of the phone. He sounded positively giddy. "Oh, I am, Mom. Jared had another visit with me, the doctor, and I told him that now, and he told them he's now living with his other parents. The doctor thinks it's just his imagination. It's normal for children to create worlds inside their mind, at such a young age." "Oh, that's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy, and yet a little weirded out by Martin's overly positive tone. "You and Tracy doing okay then?" "Oh yeah, Mom." He turned the phone over to Tracy, who was equally as positive. "Oh, hi, Camille. Isn't the news wonderful? Jared is doing so great. We're all planning a trip to Disneyland in the fall. You should come. They say it's the happiest place on earth." We'll see." I ended the conversation with Tracy because the kitchen timer went off, and it meant dinner was ready. Martin took over the conversation once again. "Mom, I think your roast smells delicious." I thought it was strange. It was a very strange thing to say. I figured my son was making a joke. How he knew what I was cooking, I have no idea. I never mentioned it. We ended the conversation shortly after. I had listened to his enthusiasm, and I was generally happy for him that Jared was doing better. The following week, I was at our local grocery store in Akron, and I was at the checkout lane with my several or so items when the cashier looked at me and laughed. "You must be having one of those days, ma'am." I'm sorry?" "You see, you must need more canned beans because you were just here," she laughed. "Oh, you must have me mistaken for someone else." She looked at me then and shook her head. No, lady, unless you have a twin that wears the same clothes you were in a few minutes ago, as in maybe seconds." I looked at her and then thought about what Jared had said about the other grandma. "If you don't mind my asking a strange question, which way did I go when I left?" "Just out the main doors," said the cashier, looking at me as though I were completely mentally ill. I left the cashier's lane and ran out the door, looked around, hoping to see something, but I did not see my doppelganger. I thought of Jared. It made me curious. Maybe it was nothing. I didn't want to think about the strange occurrence between Jared and me that weekend, or the other incident at the grocery store. But it was always in the back of my mind now. What Martin had told me about Jared saying he went to live with his other parents.